Hello, everybody. Welcome to Exploring Ethics. I'm Greg Kelly. With me is my colleague, Jason Thibodeau. This is our second, what is this, discussion. Um, Last time, we talked about a couple of different ways to think about ethics that go with some unfamiliar terminology, namely uh, the deontic and the axiological. So will you, in a couple of sentences consisting of very short words, tell us, Jason, what something about the word deontic and the word axiological?
Sure. So deontic value is the value that actions have, in particular, actions in terms of what we should and shouldn't do. Okay.
Yeah,
Um, and axiological is kind of the other value. Now, we're talking about moral value here. So that might, just so people don't get the wrong idea, there are other kinds of value, including aesthetic value. Let's put all the other value, non-moral value, to one
yeah,
side. This
yeah, yeah. Uh,
moral.
if people want to learn something about aesthetic value, they can listen to my solo show, which is called Appreciating Poetry.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about the value of, say, poetry. We're talking about moral value.
Yeah, moral value. And if you're worried exactly what moral means right now, I think that's a legitimate worry, but I would just say you kind of know what we're talking about. And if you don't, we'll just think about goodness, right?
Okay.
Goodness,
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
as opposed to deontic values or things like rightness and wrongness.
Okay, so yeah, when I first heard the word deontic from, let me see, from you, um, we talk about, well, we talk about Immanuel Kant's deontology. I understand that deontology and deontic mean two different things, but they're both involved with obligation or duty or actions that you should take
Mhm.
or actions that you should refrain from taking. Um, and so that's one whole big idea about value, but I gather that we're gravitating more toward the idea of not so much right and wrong, although they overlap a whole lot, but good and bad. So what makes things good? What makes actions or objects or attitudes good would be a big question for ethics, would it not, Jason?
Yeah, so let me say a few things about that that might be helpful. So when we're thinking about moral evaluation, we can think about the kinds of things we evaluate morally. Okay. So we might evaluate an action morally, certainly. That was the wrong thing to do. Shouldn't have told that lie, for example. Um, but we also evaluate things that aren't action, again, morally evaluate. So we might talk about a bad state of affairs, a morally bad state of affairs. So, for example, one where people who do bad things prosper, uh, that situation, that state of affairs is bad, independent of the fact that the people did things that were wrong. Their prospering is bad. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
a situation where people go hungry is bad, presumably morally bad. So that kind of badness is axiological, and of course, its opposite, goodness. So a state of affairs where hungry people are provided with food is good, right? So that's what we're talking about with respect to axiological value.
okay. So uh, obviously, when we talk about ethics, we're talking a lot about value. Um, and I noticed that you use the word evaluate.
Mhm.
And so the word value is a noun, says the professor of English, and the word uh, evaluate is a verb. So this noun is what? Value is a quality of things?
If I had to guess, I would say, yeah, it certainly seems that way. It's a quality or property.
Okay. Whereas evaluation is something that people do.
Right.
Okay, so I think it's important that we don't kind of straddle the fence and use the word value as a verb. Maybe it's a legitimate verb,
Yes.
but in order to keep me from being confused, I think we ought to talk about value as a property or a quality. In any case, it's a noun.
Right. So you're absolutely right. It's important to distinguish value as a noun from value as a verb. When
Which I
value,
just kind of want to exclude. I just kind of want to say, let's agree not to use it, and instead use the word evaluate. That's a verb. That's something people do.
yeah. Though, so there's another subtlety though when it comes to value as a noun, because people talk about their values, right?
Right.
That's again not really what we're talking about.
Would
Does
you
that make
repeat
sense?
that last thing? I think you
Oh
hung.
yeah. So yeah. So people talk about
Their values or Republican values or family values.
conservative values, liberal values, what have you,
Yes.
and that's not what we mean when we're talking about axiological value. Um, so, uh, so in the sense of axiological value and goodness and badness, I think it's right or most helpful to think of these things as properties. So goodness is the property that, for example, a situation or a state of affairs could have, right? Um, and so that means that it's not uh, something that a person holds. But when we're talking about conservative values, family values, liberal values, there we're talking about something that a person holds. Like these are the values that I hold. Now, I'm not
That I
exactly,
cherish, that I hew to.
yes. And so though I think that's something close to a belief. In any event, it's clearly has to do with some state of a subject, right? Um, whereas the state the state of affairs where hungry children are provided with food, um, it's being good, right? That state of affairs being good is not obviously, at least not obviously, I should say, not obviously a subjective state, right? Um, so that's one difference between uh, value in the sense of goodness and badness, and values as in what I cherish, what I hold as a liberal or as a conservative or what have you.
Mhm.
And again, that in that other sense, in that latter sense, I think that those are something like just beliefs about what's important.
Yeah, I think this is maybe a slight bit of a tangent, but there are a couple of general issues that I think we need to clarify in these discussions. And the first is that in sort of academic discussions, we tend to try to narrow the vocabulary a little bit. I mean, in outside of a discussion where we're trying to really clarify things, just in ordinary life, we use words like value and words like argument. We use these words in various senses, and a lot of times in rather vague senses. And so, when I say I want to exclude value as a verb, or when we use the noun value, we're referring to something, we're referring not to something subjective. I think, uh, you know, I just want to claim that that's something we have to do in order not to fall into confusion, in order not to confuse our listeners, our viewers, and in order not to confuse ourselves, and in order not to misrepresent things. So that's just a little digression on why do we have to linger over one word for 10 minutes? And it's because we, in in daily life, in different contexts, we use words in various different ways. But if we're trying to understand moral value, especially, we've got to think of it as something other than just my belief or my opinion or something that I cherish or something that I cling to or something like that. It's got to have a more objective character than that. Okay. So so I need to make, or I need to ask you to make for us two more steps, and I don't know what order these need to go in. So we've talked a little bit about value, and we've talked a little bit about good, in that things that are good have the value that we identify as goodness. Is that right?
Yeah, seems like
Yeah.
it.
So, or when things are bad, states of affairs are bad, like children are starving. Uh, we say that that state of affairs is bad. It has the value of not good, of badness. Okay. Now, I recall, and I don't know if I'm repeating myself or not, that before you and I ever read On What Matters by Derek Parfit, you told me that you were interested in this book that had just come out, and that Parfit was attempting, in part, to resituate morality away from command or imperative and toward value. Uh, and that sounded like a good thing to me. And when we did start to read that novel, we discovered the very first sentence that said, we humans, I put in brackets, we are the animals that can understand, that can both understand and respond to reasons. We are the animals that can both understand and respond to reasons. So the first jump I have to make is from value to good, and I think we made that jump. The second jump I want to make is between value to reasons. So how do we make that jump? How do we relate value to reasons?
Yeah. So we're focused for now, at least, on goodness. So axiological value, goodness, and the opposite, badness. So let's just focus on that for the time being. Uh, and the theory of the theory of goodness that I was trying to articulate in our last discussion is what Parfit defends in that book on what matters. And it's something like this. Goodness is the higher order property that something can have, whereby it, that object or situation or whatever, has features that give us reasons, in particular, reasons to have positive attitudes towards it. So, for example, if we take that situation where the children who are hungry are provided with food,
Mm-hmm.
I said that's a good situation. Um, what that so that means that it has that property, goodness, and that property consists in the fact that that situation has features that give us, all of us, everyone, reasons to have positive attitudes towards it, to do things like admire it, be grateful for it, want that it continue, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So maybe I'll stop there and see.
Yeah, so we observed last time that it's very difficult to define the word reasons. And I think we've probably agreed with this old guy, that guy George Moore, G.E. Moore, who said that he can't define the word good at all. So good, says Moore, is too simple to define, that we can't analyze it, we can't break it down in any way. However, by describing it, we can come to an understanding of it. And Parfit says something similar about the word reasons, although he doesn't give up entirely on defining the word reasons. It's just that his definition is a little, what shall I say, soggy, a little unemphatic. That reasons count in favor or stand in favor of something, of some attitude or action or something. But what he says that I think is a little more profound is he can't, it's very difficult to define the word reasons, but he can make us think thoughts or get us to think thoughts that will help us understand what reasons are. So you give the hypothetical example of children who are well fed or who are provided with food. So with your permission, Jason, I'm going to use an example that I use when I talk about ethics in my writing classes, how ethics is related to writing. I won't bore everybody with, but obviously, when we address somebody, either in speech or in writing, we should address them respectfully. We should address them truthfully. We should acknowledge that any mutual understanding we want to reach is going to be dependent to a great extent upon fact and not upon myth and not upon belief. So the example that I give my students when I talk about ethics is that my wife is allergic to the oils in orange peels. And now, the allergy itself is bad, but not in the moral sense, I think, right? Because it causes her pain, it causes the danger of anaphylactic shock and so forth.
We might want to call that moral. It's not deontic, though.
Okay, okay. In any case, it's just a biological fact, a medical fact, that my wife is allergic to the oils in orange peels. So it seems to me that that fact, which is an objective state of affairs, has nothing to do with beliefs or preferences or anything like that, gives me a reason to peel my oranges somewhere where my wife isn't. So she's not so allergic that I can't ever bring them into the house. It's just that if anybody peels an orange near my wife, she gets respiratory symptoms. And the unfortunate thing about allergies is you never quite know how severe they could be. So, if I may share a sentimental moment with you, Jason, I love going into the backyard with my 3-year-old granddaughter, soon to be joined by a little brother. Did I ever mention that to you?
You mentioned a new grandchild on the way, but I think this is the first I've heard that it's a brother.
Yeah, yeah. So that's pretty great. But you see, so my little granddaughter and I go in the backyard and we peel oranges and we throw the peels into the bushes. And it's a jolly time. The important point, however, is that a fact, namely my wife's orange peel oil allergy gives me reason to not expose my wife to the oils in orange peels. That's it. Great story, huh?
Okay. Yes. We're having a little bit of lag. I don't know if you're experiencing it.
Okay, well, I think the last sentence or two were dispensable, so continue. I just by way of trying to
I'm not, it
get
could just
somebody,
be,
just by way of trying to get somebody to have thoughts that will help them understand what reasons are. The fact of my wife's allergy gives me reason not to peel oranges in her presence. Yeah, you're freezing a little bit here and there too. Sorry,
yes, I'm
folks.
worried that the lag is on my end. So I'm wondering if
I fear that it might be, Jason, but you're not in your usual cozy confines,
halfway across the country, in fact.
halfway across the country from home. But that means that you're halfway closer to me.
That is
So
true.
shouldn't that mean our connection is better? No, I don't think it works like that.
Indeed, yes. I probably about 13 hours drive from you,
Yeah.
right?
Okay. So uh, we can relate reasons to good because that which is good gives us reason to approve, right?
Or have some other positive attitude, yes.
Yeah. So I don't know how to make this as a question, so I guess I'll just make a statement. But our approval has no bearing on the value in itself. In
Yeah,
other
so
words, our approving of something doesn't make it have value.
that's correct. On this view that I'm trying to explain, it is not the case that our having some attitude makes it the case that the object we're evaluating has value. I don't know if that makes sense. So it's not the case that my approving of children being fed makes it the case that that situation is a good one. That is wrong, right? Rather, the situation has features that give me reasons. Those features are independent of me, and those features give me reasons to have an attitude of approval.
Mm-hmm.
um, and so, what does that amount to? Well, I guess it means, to put it simply, I should approve of that. Now, everything else being equal, I should approve. Given that I have reason to approve, I should. Of course, I might not, right? I might be callous and not care at all, or I might even not know about it.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless of whether I do in fact approve, I have reason to. And the reasons are provided by the features of the situation.
Okay. So I think we ought to just sort of print a disclaimer at the bottom of the screen that reasons for taking actions or for holding attitudes are not the same thing as reason thought of as something in our brain or something in our mind. I don't know how quite to clarify this, but in my shop, where we tend to talk a lot about literary and cultural history, we often talk about the age of reason, which is roughly the second half of the 17th century and the entire 18th century in Europe. And this is when everybody thought reason was really great. And what they're referring to is reason as a capacity of the mind that when you're 7 years old, you've reached the age of reason. And when you're thinking about what you're doing, you should listen to reason. And all of that, it seems to me, is a big confusion. And so I guess that's sort of my theme today is I guess we could talk about reason as a faculty of the mind. Personally, I don't think that that is very helpful. Honestly, I don't think the whole theory of faculties is particularly helpful. But what we're talking about is reasons as features in the world that give us to approve, disapprove, to choose one action over another, and so forth. I just want to try to make that distinction, and it's a difficult distinction to make because reasons, in the sense that we're using the word, is quite difficult to define.
Yes. So maybe it might be helpful to think about different kinds of reasons in the sense we're talking about. We've been talking about moral value in the way that goodness is connected to reasons, but we can also talk about epistemic reasons, and those would be reasons to believe, or reasons that count in favor of believing. And so if you think about maybe a criminal investigation, something like break into a house or something, and you find a fingerprint inside the house that doesn't belong to any of the owners of the house, and you identify that fingerprint as belonging to John Smith or whatever. That fingerprint is a reason to believe that John Smith committed the burglary. Right? It counts in favor of believing it.
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
And notice it's not definitive. Maybe John Smith was in the house for a legitimate reason.
Yes.
So it's not a decisive thing, but it still counts in favor of it.
Right. I think that that's related to the fact that we habitually refer to reasons in our sense in the plural,
Mm-hmm.
and that reasons tend to accumulate in order to like reach an epistemic conclusion. Episteme has to do with knowledge. To reach an epistemic conclusion, or indeed to choose one action or another, or to hold some attitude.
Yeah, right. So one of the things that example of the fingerprint exemplifies is that reasons count in favor, but on their own they count in favor to some extent. The reason by itself is rarely the entire story. You have to consider all the factors before you have a determination about what you should believe, or what you
Yes,
should do, what attitude you should hold.
yes. I think I heard you use the expression "all things considered"
Yes.
earlier in this discussion. Now, isn't it a practical objection that it's impossible to consider all things?
It is a practical objection, but I mean, objection to what, I would want to know. But if it's, I mean, and this, I take it that the sense in which it's practical is just that, well, we're never going to be in a position to be aware of all the reasons.
Yes.
So all
Yes.
of our judgments are limited.
I've served on several juries, Jason, and it's often been a fairly unpleasant experience because we don't have a lot of experience connecting reasons and then ultimately reaching a determination, what unfortunately is called a decision, which kind of to a lot of people implies choice. You choose one of the other alternatives. We don't have a lot of experience in our lives in a very um, uh, kind of systematic, very controlled way, such as you experience in the courtroom. We don't have much experience piecing together items of evidence, which in isolation are not decisive, but the prosecution intends will combine to produce a decisive outcome. And since people don't have a lot of experience with that, I certainly don't, it makes this process kind of baffling and really very difficult.
But as long as we're keeping the distinction between judgment and values, for long as we're paying attention to that distinction, we can distinguish between the metaphysical question, who committed the burglary, right? And I'm not using metaphysical in any fancy sense. I just mean what's the real fact, right?
Yes.
And the judgment that the jury might about that.
Yes. I mean,
I'm
really,
pausing because
that digression, I'm sorry about.
I'm sure I'm lagging for you.
Yeah. That digression was stimulated by this phrase, all things considered. So I mean, obviously there's infinite fact in the universe, so you can't consider all things. However, you consider all of the evidence that's been presented by the prosecution and by the defense. And theoretically, then, based on the evidence that you have before you, you reach a determination one way or the other.
And so the analogous, the analogy to the real fact about whether the defendant committed the burglary, the analogy to that in the moral case is, well, is the situation really good? Right? And the analogous fact to the judgment that this defendant is guilty, that's analogous to the judgment that the situation is good, right?
Right.
And this understanding of goodness has it that the goodness is there. It consists in the features, right, that give us reasons. That's consistent with us making the wrong judgment, right? Because we're not aware of the features, or because we misapprehend the features. So I think if we pay attention to that distinction between the judgment and the fact, your worry, your practical concern might diminish.
So would I be right in saying that the reason ought to precede the action or the attitude?
The reason is prior to it, in the sense that it gives. So not necessarily temporally or anything like that, but it comes first from the perspective of what's metaphysically prior in terms of goodness. Like when we're talking about goodness, what is metaphysically most salient, most relevant, most important? It isn't the attitude; it's the features that give us reason to have the attitude.
Well, I'll tell you where I'm going with this. So let's say, Jason, that I have a very positive attitude toward a Dodge Challenger, toward a fast car that's really loud. Man, I just love the sound when you're changing the gears in a Dodge Challenger, let's say. So doesn't the fact that the car is really cool, loud and fast, give me reason to want to buy that car?
Yeah. So maybe
the feeling that I have toward that car give me a reason to want it.
I don't think so. Now, the answer to that question is going to depend upon our understanding of what reasons are and in virtue of what some factor is a reason
Yeah.
Uh, there's a long, I mean, there's
I,
a
I,
lot.
I'm afraid this is the problem with hypotheticals, that I semi-deliberately stacked the deck because I claimed that the coolness of the car was a fact. I said the fact that the car is cool. And that was a an erroneous move on my part. Because coolness isn't a fact, is it?
In the sense you're talking about, I doubt it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, in the metaphorical sense we use cool, obviously, as a relative temperature, something can be cooler than something that's hot. But when we use the word cool in relation to cars, we're, what are we talking about? We're talking about something that uh, appeals to us on an emotional level, I think. And I mean, so people can say that
think I'm
whether the
trying
car is cool or not is a matter of opinion.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Well, what I'm trying to get at is we've said that that which is good gives us reason to approve of it, or it gives us reason to take some action or hold some attitude. And I guess what I'm getting at is that it doesn't work in both directions. In other words, because I have a positive attitude towards something doesn't mean that it's good. And this is important because we often think, I fear, that because I like a thing or because I approve of a thing, then it is virtually by definition a good thing. Because how can I approve
Yeah,
of something that's not good?
that's right. So maybe I can tell a story, uh, if we have enough time for a story
Yeah.
about my own views about goodness.
Okay.
So, uh, okay, okay. So the story is that when I was a young uh, graduate student, in my early 20s, I wasn't interested in ethics. I was interested in philosophy of mind and philosophy of language. Um, but I had friends who were interested in ethics, and I went to um, lots of ethical colloquia, and I took some ethics classes. And one of my good friends was doing his dissertation plan involved doing something in ethics. And one day we used to uh, live in roughly the same part of San Diego, close to campus, so we would walk. So we were walking, and I was offering a view about goodness that goodness is subjective, that what makes something good is my attitude, right? So something might be good for me because I have a positive attitude towards it. But if you don't have share that attitude, then it isn't good, right? Um, and so I said, things are good because we want them or because we like them, something like that. And what my friend said, his name is Jeff, what he said is, well, that doesn't correspond to what the kinds of decisions that I make, or at least want to make. It doesn't correspond to how I conceive of myself as making judgments about, for example, what I want. Because I don't want what I want things that are good. Um, and his point is that if things were good because I wanted them, then anything I wanted would, by that, just in virtue of that, it would be good. But that isn't the way it is. Like, I have had many times, and when I was thinking, when he said that, it occurred to me that many times I have had the experience of wanting something and getting it, and then finding out that it wasn't good. Right?
Mhm.
It wasn't worth wanting. I shouldn't have wanted it because it isn't good.
A
Uh,
lot of times, the thing that you acquire may actually be pretty good, but your wanting it was disproportionate.
That is, yes, absolutely, that is true. But sometimes you actually want something that turns out not to be
Uh-huh.
good. So like, I don't know, going to see a concert. I mean, I don't know, maybe that's not a good example, but you might, have a desire to go somewhere to do something, go to Disneyland or something, and then you get there and you realize, well, this is not what I thought it would be. It's a lot more people there, a lot more difficult, not really good.
Yeah, yeah,
Something like that. I don't know if
yeah.
that's a good example or not. We could probably think about this. But anyway, the point is that what my friend showed me just by saying, well, I want what's good. I don't want what I want. I want what's good, is that the idea that my wanting something or my having a good attitude towards it is what makes it good. That just seems completely wrong. Because if it were true, then I could just make anything good. I just have the right attitude towards it, and it would, in virtue of that, be good. So, for example, I could like, donkey excrement. If I just had the right attitude towards it, donkey poop would be good. That can't be right.
So some character in Shakespeare is nothing is good or evil, but thinking makes it so.
I believe Hamlet says that
I
to
think it's
Rosencrantz.
Hamlet, you know, and the thing about Hamlet is that he's uh, pathologically depressed.
Well, when I read Hamlet in high school, and when that line was uttered, we read it out loud in class. I thought that was great, and that was kind of my motto about goodness.
Yeah,
Nothing is good or bad.
I think the youth are very much attracted to like uh there are no fixities, only you squares want it to be just always just predictable and straight and narrow. Well, this is, I think, kind of where the rubber hits the road, Jason, because I teach 100 some odd students a semester. And I do talk about ethics in my writing class because ethics is really important for communication, whether it's in real time or asynchronous, like writing. Um, and I constantly hear these expressions like your truth or my truth. And this this claim that morality, oh, it's all subjective. And I kind of don't know what they mean by that, but when I offer arguments like the one you just did, that uh, wanting we want things because they're good. They're not good because we want them. I mean, that's the way it should be, I think. But a lot of people are very resistant to this idea. Um, and I think that the resistance to an objectivity of value has to do with at least two factors, and maybe we'll remember to sort of start here next time, Jason, that that there is a distinction to be made between the value of something and our evaluation of it. And secondly, precisely because we can't consider all things, precisely because we don't know all fact, we have to weigh factors and we have to make a judgment. And the fact that we have to make judgments leads people to imagine that that which we are judging is merely subjective.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think that may very well be a big part of it. I
I
suspect
don't
there's
know.
other things.
Maybe, I'm sorry to interrupt. Maybe we should bring in a spokesperson for subjectivism.
I definitely think we should at some point, but I think that before we do that, I think we want to ourselves consider some reasons that people think that morality is subjective, and maybe talk more about what it would mean for morality to be subjective. Because as you just said, you're not sure what your students mean or what other people mean when
Yeah,
they say it's all subjective.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
maybe you and I could try to explain what they might mean, and then think of some, some reasons to object to the idea that morality is objective, and then get through that. And then I think we should find a good spokesman or woman for the subjectivity of value and talk to them and go through
Okay,
it.
cool. Well, folks, I think that wraps it up for this episode of Exploring Ethics with Thibodeau and Kelly. For Jason Thibodeau, I'm Greg Kelly. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.